Get sharp, stay sharp, and be honest. October 31, 2019 by Anna von Reitz. As my readers have learned, the United States of America is not the same as the United States of America, nor is it the same as the United States of America. The rule of law is not law. The state of Wisconsin is not the state of Wisconsin, nor the state of Wisconsin, either. There is exactly one actual state called Wisconsin, no state of descriptor is attached to that name. Wisconsin is Wisconsin. Period. There are 3 original constitutions in which powers were delegated and shared among subcontractors, including two foreign governments, in the business of providing governmental services. The 2 foreign subcontractors were the British Monarch and the Pope. The American subcontractor was the original confederation of states formed under the Articles of Confederation, but the Confederation split apart in 1860 and has never been reconstructed by the states of our Federation of States, the United States of America. This created a vacuum of power, and first the British, and then later the Popes, usurped into this vacancy, substituting their own state-of-state franchises for the actual American organizations we are owed. Thus, by guile, omission, and sleight of hand, these foreign subcontractors that are supposed to be here operating in good faith to provide a few enumerated services have endeavored to commandeer our federal government. They have largely succeeded for 150 years, until now. The civil government provided by the popes and the municipal United States government is not the same as our civilian government. The military is obligated to take its orders from the civilian government, but instead, the civil government, think Federal Civil Service, has been substituting itself as the civilian authority. This is a foreign civilian populace at best, and has no authority granted to it to substitute itself for our civilian government. These similar name deceits have been used throughout the versus the state of state versus state, and even state of state versus state, rule of law versus actual law, civil government substituted for civilian government, and so on. To beat these monsters at their game requires us to be sharp enough to recognize the subtle differences in language and to question these differences instead of assuming anything. It requires us to learn what has aptly been described as code, as in code words and federal code, and also to recognize it when we are dealing with the territorial government and when we are dealing with the municipal government. Most of all, it requires us to know who we are, what our actual country and nationality is, and what we are owed from these bilkers, as well as a practical grasp of their court system and why it has no jurisdiction related to us. Their courts deal in contract law, exclusively. They assume that they have contracts with you, in part because of falsified public records, in part because of adhesion contracts you are coerced into, and in part they just plain bluff it until they can stuff it. It is your job to defeat them in their purposes and to expose their corruption and to demand reform. Never identify yourself by your full name. Just first and middle. Ask the court if they are dealing in contract law. They will have to admit, yes. Then ask to see the contract subjecting your name to their jurisdiction. They will either dismiss on the spot or bring a variety of records or reference a state-of-state constitution. You must reply that you live in a state, not a state of state, and are not a signatory on any state-of-state constitution. And for the rest, you must be prepared to make appropriate reply. Birth certificates are all unconscionable and coerced contracts established by third parties when you were only days old. Licenses of all kinds and mortgages have all been obtained and enforced under conditions of deceit and non-disclosure, so that you made a mistake under duress, and wish to correct that mistake. Better still, do your paperwork and be able to bring along the public record evidence that you already did make the effort to self-correct the mistake. Aside from these sorts of things, these courts, generally speaking, have no contracts and no jurisdiction related to Joe Average American. Their only actual justification for being here is to provide you with good faith service, a fact that they need to have repeated and repeated in their ears, until they finally wake up and go, OMG. Just look at what I've been doing. But you can only provide that cathartic experience for your public servants once you have a firm hand on who you are, where you stand, who they are, where they stand, and learn to navigate the space between. It is important to stay scrupulously honest. They are, knowingly or unknowingly, engaged in criminal activity. So you must give them no excuse to complain against you, like the filthy guilty Democrats are now attempting to claim their own sins against President Trump. You must stand above them as the cliffs stand above the sea. And when the day comes, let them dash themselves like useless waves against eternity.